Okay, hello, my name is Sam, my pronouns are they, them, and welcome back to my office. It is that time of the month. It is time for the July reset. We go over what I read in June and what I'm planning on reading in July. So we have so much to go through because I read an obscene amount in the month of June, and I'm planning to read an obscene amount in the month of July. This is how I am emotionally coping with my entire existence and all of the responsibilities that I have and all of the social responsibilities that are coming my way. So let's just get this started because, oh boy, there's a lot. So I'm gonna pull up my story graph because the story graph holds my life together. I could not function without story graph in my life. I feel like the month of June was kind of like a mediocre reading month for the most part. I did have a series that I really loved that I started and finished this month, but other than that, I felt like it was overall kind of mediocre. So the first thing that I finished was Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This was on my 23 backlist of 2023. I started and finished the series this year, and now we're done. I gave it a 4-star. I liked this like #1 out of all of the books on the trilogy, and I thought it was good. I thought it was good for its time period and also the point in Leigh Bardugo's career. You can definitely start to see some improvements in her writing and her storytelling in this book. So I think that's a fantastic sign, and I'm really excited to get started on Six of Crows. Next, so my grandfather was in the hospital this month, and he did ultimately pass, but I had to like panic drive down to Massachusetts to see him at the beginning of this month, and I went directly to a comfort read with my partner, and I made her listen to this as an audiobook, and that was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. I think I've read this at least 3 or 4 times now. It is a comfort book for me. I love this entire series. I always give it 5 stars. I love everything about it. So I've heard that some other people don't like it. This is an autistic love story, and the main character is Stella. She is autistic, and she's like super smart autistic and like has a hard time with people, but her mom is pressuring her to get married and have babies, and Stella is just like, I don't know how to do such a thing. So she hires Michael, a male escort, to teach her how to be romantic socially and in bed. And it's really good, and I really like it, and it's a comfort read, and I'm not taking critiques on it at this time. After that, I don't have a physical copy of this. I read Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix. I read that as an ebook, and I gave it a 3-star. I think this so far has been my least favorite of Grady Hendrix books. So this is basically like a horror book that takes place in an IKEA, and it was fine. Some really scary things happen. This knockoff IKEA, like, he explicitly states that this is not IKEA, for legality terms, I'm assuming, but it's like built on this land that used to be like a really, really horrible prison, and it gets all spooky scary, and I thought it was fine. So I was on a big old Grady Hendrix kicks for the past couple months, and I think that kind of might have knocked me out of it. And then we moved on to my big project for the month. That is the Wayward Children series. I did a whole big old video on it. I think it was like an hour. I have almost all of the books here physically except for one. So we have Every Heart a Doorway, 5 stars. We have Down Among the Sticks and Bones, 5 stars. We have Beneath a Sugar Sky, I read as an audiobook. I gave it 4 stars. We have In an Absent Dream. I gave that 5 stars. We have Come Tumbling Down. I gave that 4 stars. We have Across the Green Grass Fields. I gave that 4.5 stars. We have Where the Drowned Girls Go. I gave that 4 stars. And we have Lost in the Moment and Found. I gave that 4.5 stars. So overall, this is a series about children who, kind of like Alice in Wonderland, go through doors. These are the stories about what happens when they have to come back to the human world. And all of the things that they have to go through, they go to Eleanor's School for Wayward Children to try and cope with returning back to the human world. Overall, an amazing series. I'm super excited to read more by Seanan McGuire. I thought that it had some really good, interesting queer rep. I thought it was a lot of the times, it was really nice, casual queer rep, where it was just a part of the students. It wasn't the main conflict in the story, which is my favorite thing about queer stories, when your queerness is not the conflict. So if you want to hear me go through each one of those books, all 8 of them, yeah, feel free to go grab that other video. It's like an hour. So sorry for that. There was a lot to say. Okay. Guilty pleasure reads of this month were the first 3 books in the Wicked Villain series by Katie Roberts. Now, does this series kind of underwhelm me in comparison to her Neon God series? Absolutely. I love her Neon God series. But, you know what, this is just some nice, easy, spicy romance. So, even if it's a little underwhelming, I still enjoy it. So, Desperate Measures, I gave that a 3.5 star. That was a romance between Jasmine and Jafar. So, all of these stories are based off Disney characters. So yeah, we have Learn My Lesson, which is number 2. That I gave that 3 stars, and that was between Hades, Hercules, and Meg. So that was a polyam relationship. All of these are BDSM based also. And then A Worthy Opponent was number 3. I gave that 3 stars. That was around Captain Hook and Tinkerbell. So yeah, overall, those were my break books. My brain is receiving a full-on break in the moment. Okay, next audiobook that I read was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I really enjoyed this. If you wish you liked Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, but you really hate it, pick up A Dowry of Blood. This woman's telling us a story, relaying it back to her partner who was a vampire. He turned her, and she's just retelling the story of their lives and all of his abuse. And it is a queer, polyamorous vampire story, and it was fantastic. I gave it a 4 star. And then I also listened to the audiobook for Written in the Stars by Alexandria Belfleur. Surprisingly, I hated it. I gave it a 2.5. I really hated it. I didn't think it was very good. I thought that both of the main characters were pretty insufferable, and I did not enjoy their relationship. I did not enjoy their dynamic, and I did not see their connection, at all. You can tell that the majority of the connection was based off physicality, but even the romance scenes, they weren't very good. I didn't like it. I don't think I'm gonna ever read anything else by this author, which makes me sad because this author is a very standard queer sapphic author, but not for me. I can't even really tell you what it was about. I just hated it. And then I read Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph Wife. This is a overall queer horror that focuses on religious trauma, so it's the end of the world, and these crazy, I believe they're based off evangelical Christians or something like that. I don't know. Some form of Christianity in some variety. They basically destroy the world and cause the apocalypse and murder the majority of the world, and they start infecting people with this awful virus called the Flood, and it turns them into crazy monsters. And our main person we follow is Benji. He is a trans teenage boy who has been infected with the Flood to become the Seraph, which is God's wrath or whatever, and he controls all of the monsters who were affected by the Flood in a monstrous capacity. And he's just I hate you all. and he goes and gets involved in like the remaining group in the city, which is like a LGBT center. I gave this a 4-star. I really liked it. It wasn't exactly for me. Like, it definitely wasn't. I wasn't the target audience for this because there was some pretty severe body horror and all of that. And also, I feel like this would be a lot more impactful for someone with religious trauma. But out of all the trauma I have, I don't have any religious trauma whatsoever. Score 1 for me. So, but I really liked it. And I'm really excited for Andrew Joseph White's next book, which is about a Victorian queer autistic boy. Trans queer autistic boy. Which I really enjoyed his writing style, so I'm really excited to keep going with his books. Even if this one wasn't like my perfect one. Next, I listened to the audiobook of The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I gave it a 2.5 star. I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't. I didn't like Achilles or Patroclus as characters. I didn't really like the story. I didn't really like the writing style. I didn't really like any of it. I feel like that's going to be like a controversial opinion, but I personally really just didn't like it. So it just wasn't for me. And that's fine. We're just kind of like narrowing down reading tastes around here, and that's definitely not for me. And finally, I read my last book of the month was The Deep by River Solomon. They are one of my all-time favorite authors, so I was really happy to finally get to pick this up. I gave this a 5-star. This is a story of the story of the Wajanru, which are like mermaid-type creatures who were created by the sea from pregnant women who were thrown overboard from their slave ships, and their babies, while they were in their system, they were able to adapt to the water and like be birthed from the corpse of their mothers, and that's how this society came to be. And it's all about how the society has like the historian who holds every single memory for the past 600 years that the society has been going, so that the rest of the society does not have to hold on to these brutal and devastating memories. And this was fantastic. I love River Solomon. I just think that they're an amazing writer. They always write really impactful and like devastating stories, and I always feel like I take a lot from their stories and think about a lot of other concepts that I might not have been considering previously. Because I read Sorrowland by River Solomon, and that was a 5-star. I loved that, and that was all about like genetic testing on the Black community. That was a terrifying horror. And this one, so it's labeled as like a dark fiction or like a dark fantasy, but I would put it under the horror category, because when you really start to think about things, like it's a pretty horrifying, not even just concept of how this community, like society was created, but like what our main character goes through. It's horrifying. Now, let's talk about my one DNF for the month. My one DNF for the month really has surprised me. It is An Unkindness of Ghost by River Solomon, which is, I think, their first, like their debut novel. And I am not DNFing this because I don't like it. I really like it so far, but it's sci-fi. And sci-fi is not my genre. I feel myself not enjoying it as much as I know that I would be, because I'm really just not in the mood for a sci-fi at all. I'm just gonna pick it up at a later date. Like the next time I'm craving a sci-fi, I'm going to pick up An Unkindness of Ghosts. And then the world will be fine. The world will be happy. That was everything for the month of June. I read 19 books. And with that number, let's get started on my number for July and what I'm planning on doing for July. So let's start with July for the things that I've already started and I am in the middle of, which is Queer Little Nightmares, which is an anthology where queer authors take like classic queer horror characters and they write a story revolving around that. I'm breaking that down for my beginners queer horror vlog that I'm doing, because I'm trying to get into horror and I'm definitely a beginner and I just kind of want to read queer horror for the most part. So that's going well so far. And then I'm also reading Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield right now. I have a physical copy of it, but I don't know where it is right now. I'm only like 30 pages into that, so I don't really have any thoughts on it at this exact moment. But those are the two that I'm starting with. After that, let's just go over some audiobooks that I'm planning on picking up in the month of July. First of all, I am going to pick up Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros because I have the audiobook right now. My hold finally came in for it, so I'm going to pick that up. And that is like my main fantasy for the month because I'm feeling like the month of July is to be horror, spooky, witchy central. So with that, we have some options to pick from. I've got Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, which I believe is kind of like a zombie horror where like the virus only really attacks like testosterone. That's all I got from it, but it's supposed to be a really good beginner's queer horror. I also picked up Summer Suns by Leigh Mandello. I have no idea what that's about, but it's supposed to be like a really good queer horror, so I was like, I'm gonna grab it. Let's go. Other than that, I did grab the rest of the Wicked Villain series by Katie Roberts. So we've got The Beast, which I believe is a Beast, Gaston, and Belle romance. We have The Sea Witch, which I believe is an Ursula romance. And then we have Queen Takes a Rose. I have no idea who that's about, but those are like my break books, my like just consuming something fun and easy and something that I don't really think about all that much. Like Katie Roberts is just someone that I don't really critically analyze anything for when I'm reading her books. They're just like a soothing my soul scenario. So those are the audiobooks for the month. Let's go through some physical books. For like the 6th time this year, I have Gideon the Ninth and Harold the Ninth on my TBR. I am determined to get into these. This is Sapphic Necromancers. What's more spooky than fantasy Sapphic Necromancers? I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to pick it up this month. I am determined to do so. These are going to be how I cope with a baby shower outside in the middle of June in Connecticut. And then I have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is like a queer mushroom, like fungal horror. And it's nice and short. And I'm really excited for it. And then we have A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. And I believe this is queer, but I think this is about a daughter who goes back to the home she grew up in to find her mom like petrified of something in the house. So I'm excited about that. And then we have The Daughter of Dr. Moreo by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I don't really know what this is about. I know that this is supposed to be like Latina Gothic story, and I loved Mexican Gothic so much. So I really was just willing to pick this up and be like, hell yeah. And I got it on sale a couple months ago, so it's totally worth it. After that, I have The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. I've got a little sticker on it. It was on sale, and I don't know, how can I help myself? It's supposed to be like about, I think, a psychic teenage boy and some of the shenanigans and horrible things that can go on in that scenario. So why not? It looks short. It looks like it's going to be a good break where I can still get something spooky, but not something that's so intense. You know? Speaking of things that are a little less intense, I have The X-Hex by Erin Sterling. I found this hardcover Book of the Month edition at a used bookstore for like $4. So how could I not pick it up for $4? a book of the month edition. Like, and I think this is supposed to be like a cozy romance, like a cozy witchy romance. I don't believe this is queer in any capacity. I don't really know anything about what this is about, but for $4, a hardcover, how could I not pick it up and be excited to give it a try? I feel like I see people relate it to Bewitched sometimes, and I've never seen that. That was a little bit earlier than my era, so I don't really know, but I guess we're gonna go with it. And then speaking of more cozy, easy books to read, I have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, which I am picking this up because, if y'all don't know, I was originally a TJ Klune lover. Hardcore lover of The House on the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door. And then I realized what extreme harm to the Native community he has done with his stories. He has taken their trauma, especially, like, specifically the residential school trauma, and he's exploited it, and he has not treated it in a respectful manner, and he has not really consulted with the Indigenous community or even given them an apology. And along with that, ultimately, when you break down The House of Cerulean Sea, he really says some problematic and cruel things about, like, adoption agencies, and, like, he doesn't say anything good about children should be going back to their families, and it's like a whole thing where you read it over and you think it's just cute and sweet and fun and loving, and then you, like, take a step in deeper and you really start to look at things and you're like, oh, this is actually kind of giving out a really yucky message, and you're taking advantage of a trauma that's not yours to profit. So, no more TJ Klune. I don't support him as a writer as much as I originally loved his work. You know, I've definitely taken a step back from that out of respect for Indigenous communities, and also to support them, because white authors don't have the right to just take their trauma and profit off of it. As someone who is very clearly white and also someone who is Indigenous. I am both, but I'm very, very white. So, this was recommended to me as a better version of a TJ Klune vibe novel, with a much better story and a much better author. So I've been looking for that vibe ever since I started to educate myself on the subject, and now here we are. I've got it. I'm reading it. I hope that it's everything that my heart could ever desire. And then we have She is a Haunting by Trang Than Tran. This was on my TBR for June. I didn't get to it. It's about a queer, I believe, Vietnamese girl who goes back to Vietnam and has to pretend that she is straight to try and get money for college from her father, but some real spooky gothic shit starts going on in that house, and she is not prepared for it. And then finally, the last book on my TBR for the month of July is The Silent Patient by Alex Michal. I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry, Alex. I don't have that one in me. But I'm picking this up. I really was not ever planning on picking anything up by this author ever again. He wrote The Maidens, which I gave a 2.5. I thought his story was mediocre at best, but then he threw in last minute, like last 20 pages of the book, just secret pedophilia and assault, and I was like, excuse me, like, you can't just throw secret pedophilia at me, like, 20 pages until the end of the book, like, out of nowhere, and it gave me, like, a whole trauma response. So I was not planning on ever picking anything up by him ever again for that reason, but my friend, who I very much adore, recommended this to me, and she was like, I promise there's not secret pedophilia in this. So I'm gonna give it a try, based solely off of her recommendation. because she did recently give me a book. She was like, you're gonna love this, and I did really, really love it. So I'm giving it a chance. And I'm going in with an open mind. Am I gonna regret that? I guess we're gonna see. I honestly don't know what this is about. I believe it's like a horror thriller, but I'm gonna give it a try out of pure trust and love for her. So with that, that leaves my TBR at 17 books for the month of July. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but you know what? It's where we are, and I'm really excited to get started on everything. So I guess we're just gonna roll with it, and hopefully I can get through everything that I really want to. Ultimately, the month of July, I'm really just going to try and focus as much energy as physically possible on myself, and bettering myself and getting my shit together, because I really need to get it together. And with that comes coping with all of my life problems through books. So I'm gonna say reading 17 books in the month is just self-care. That's what I'm going to put it as. And that's the excuse that I'm going to take for what I have done to myself. With that, I guess I should go get started reading. If you want to keep track and stay around, I guess you can subscribe. You are going to be getting some hardcore horror content. I mean, not hardcore horror, because I'm a scaredy cat, but like lots of manageable horror for beginners. So if you want to know more about beginner-friendly queer horror, I will be here for the month of July, because June may be over, but my queerness doesn't go away. So it's Pride Month every month in this house. Talk to everyone later. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. Bye.